Okay everybody, I'm going to go ahead and talk about why you should reload and why it's actually a good thing. So number one, obviously it's economically intelligent or logical, maybe whatever you want to call it, but I want to go ahead and talk about it while I'm reloading because a lot of people have these misconceptions on how long it takes to reload, and one of the factors is patience, I guess you could say. So I'm going to go ahead and run through my process for reloading, and you'll be able to tell by the relative amount of time on the video what it actually takes to reload. Now, for me, I like to use the smooth side, not this rough side of this this primer tray. So I like to use the smooth side, but as you saw, you have to transfer it, flip it over from the primer tray, and then flip it over again to get the backings up. So as far as primers go, if you were looking into getting into reloading, I would actually recommend CCI primers or Winchester. I would not recommend Remingtons, even though they cost more, but the problem is you might get reloaded NATO ammunition. I do like NATO ammo, and I load my reloads pretty hot, kind of like NATO ammunition, so it recoils a good amount, and that tells me that the pressures are up. My reloads in 115 grain and even 124 kind of are at about 1200 feet per second, and I make sure of that because I want pretty hot ammo. Of course, you're going to sacrifice, you know, the integrity of your brass and such, but again, this is probably the longest process and probably the most tedious part, is loading your primers. Now, some people might think there's a shortcut way of doing this, but unless you have these pieces, like several of these loaded up with primers and just ready to go, not really a great way of doing it. Now, I use the RL550B from Dillon, and it comes standard with this primer tube right here, and it comes with all the tools you need for loading primers of different types. Now, for me, I love Dillon with the experience I've had. They're very punctual about helping you out with customer service, and it's a no questions asked policy for life. So you just call them up and say, well, I broke this component on there. So you could use the electronic little indicator here that's battery powered, but this thing is pretty belligerent and it's pretty sensitive. I don't need an alarm to go off, really. Some people may, they just might want to concentrate on reloading. That's up to you. But anyways, for me, I'm just going to go ahead and dump these in here. Got to be careful that they don't come out. Typically it comes with a little clip. I don't use the clip, I just block it with my finger and then get it on the ramp here and then dump. And I make sure to flick it, especially the top here where it pinches, because it can actually hold on to these. You can hold on to a primer or something, and every now and then you might actually dump a full thing of primers if you're careless. Anyways, let's start reloading. So one of the things I would recommend is if you have a tumbler or something like that, or even stainless steel or whatever. I use a vibrating media cleaner, and I use different types of media. I'm not really too picky, but I make sure that there's nothing in the brass, because sometimes there is, and I just need to go like this to actually get it out, and sometimes I have to beat it on the reloading bench. And I actually got this stack-on reloading bench from Cabela's, and I think it was like $100, $200 or whatever, and it took a little bit to put together, but it really was easy, so I think it was a great investment. But anyways, one of the big things about this is it's going to get dirty on this primer arm right here. So when it gets primers, it's going to get pretty dirty and black, and so I like to keep a rag around, and you do need to lubricate it or it's going to get pretty stiff. And this gets really dirty on here, so you'll get all this residue from the firing residue that gets on the brass and everything, and you'll want to wipe it out and re-lubricate it, and make sure the primers go into here if you're going to brush them on here. But they could get in the track and actually block this primer rod from going fully to under the brass so it can prime it. So that's something you need to watch for. And also make sure when you're actually doing this that your arm actually picked up a primer, because that's something I've encountered a lot. And if you're loading NATO ammo, be aware that sometimes the bottom of the primer will come out, but the sides are still attached inside. And that's not exclusive to NATO ammo, but it is something that mostly happens on NATO ammo. And if the brass is really old and it's been sitting there for a while, it can corrode and they'll bond together. But and another thing is, of course, you can risk, you know, having split cases and stuff if you don't like check all your brass or whatever. I don't sort my brass. I don't really care. I just have mixed brass, whatever. And you don't really need to sort your brass. And even if you get like a split case or whatever and you accidentally load it, your firearm should be able to handle it. I've never had an issue with that, and I've never been fearful of it. And sometimes the rims, of course I wouldn't just intentionally load a split case, but sometimes the rim of the brass can actually get shucked down if you don't make sure that the bullet is actually seated like this when you get a little belling. So what's happening is it'll land on the side if you're careless about that. That's why I don't like automatic reloaders that are ridiculously progressive, because I need to watch how this stuff is happening, because sometimes you don't want to bell it out too much, or even if you do get a belling, stuff can kind of settle here and the dies can settle and give you problems down the road, so you want to watch for that. But anyways, you know, my process, my pace, I guess you could say, actually is pretty slow at first, but then it picks up after a while and as you get used to reloading. But speaking of which, I guess let's talk about the economics of it. So for primers, for my birthday these days and holidays, I just say give me gift cards. So when I go to Cabela's, I like to get CCI if I can, because they tend to go into the NATO rounds a lot easier, and pretty much everything a lot easier. But one that's on par is actually the Sellier and Bellet ammunition, and I think I got another example of a bad primer. So this is a risk that you can take, is the bottom of the primer will want to come out, and I apologize for my camera's stubbornness in the focus, but as you can see, the primer, some of the bottoms will just come out a little bit, and you can see the side is pretty much screwed. The sides will stick in and the bottoms will want to come out. So that, I have a disposal bin for that. Now remember, some of these have been fired once, some of these have been fired a lot. And if you get something like this is the reason why I don't like too much of a progressive reloader. You need to take out the one that got charged with powder. And the reason for that is you could double charge it. And when you're loading 9mm, typically it's already being loaded more than halfway. And, you know, especially mine, since I have more powder, I have about 6 grains of bullseye powder going in here, and my shots are very clean. I'm telling you, like, it's basically the equivalent of 50 rounds of Remington green and not white box, or Winchester white box when I shoot. So my stuff is very clean and it burns hot, so it's very efficient and it's very consistent. So, you know, with all that said, there is a risk of the primers being bad, so you do want to, you know, slow it down when you go to prime and just kind of feel it going forward. I have a little bit of slack here and there where it touches, and then you get a little pressure. Now, if you put a little bit more pressure, you can feel that it does want to go a little bit, but you don't want to hulk it, because two things could happen. Number one, you can force the primer in there, and then it could be a bitch taking it out and trying to get it back out, because the primer will stack on top of the other one and it'll crush it. And the other one is you could pop off that primer, and that's something that you don't want to have happen, especially if your face is like right here. You could pop off that primer and get it in your eyes. And some people might think that there's a risk of the primers catching the powder. That is a risk, obviously, but probably not in this tube because it's actually closed off. But let me go ahead and move on to another subject. I did not actually pick up a primer here, and this is another thing. So when you've got a progressive reloader where you're just reloading and reloading, if you don't lubricate this, like I forgot to lubricate it, you can actually fail to go back all the way, even though it's mechanically supposed to, you know, take care of it anyways. I'm just using brake free because I have a crap ton of it. But, you know, I'll just lubricate it a little bit. But you don't want to try to reprime it. Basically, you just take your finger on the back of the bar here. There's a little rod limiting the travel forward, and I just bring it back and I pick up another primer usually. But sometimes the actual primer tube right here can get clogged and messed up. One might want to go down sideways, and it can really fuck up your rhythm. And you'll have to go in there and use like not a tooth, well, maybe a toothpick or a paper clip, and you'll have to get that primer out of there. But it is very common to screw up primers if you're using like NATO ammo or constantly reloading. I've actually gotten pretty good life out of my brass, and again, failed to pick up a primer. And again, there we go. So I had to do it twice to pick up the primer. That's a very common thing for me. That's why you want to go full stroke and really make sure, even if it's clogged, that you have the best chance of picking up a primer. Now again, I'm just taking you guys through, and I did not put my indicator in, but I don't have very much brass in here, so I'm not too late. So there we go. We got the indicator in, and we got a good amount left. So anyways, I'll go ahead and try to pick up the pace a little bit if I can. But again, full stroke of the wad. And with this tube right here with 6 grains of bullseye going in here, it lasts a good amount of time. Now, of course, powder is by weight, not exactly by size. So like unique powder, it'll empty a lot faster because it takes a lot more. And it's pretty light, and you'll need more of a charge in order to get a more efficient burn. So I think I have to max out the amount of powder, and it basically sits right, the round will sit right on top of the powder with 124. In 115 you have a little bit less of an issue with that, but you're still sitting on the powder and you're almost compressing it a little bit. But for the most part, it's pretty reliable. But it's not uncommon when you're reloading to actually, if you're not paying attention, it's not uncommon that you could reload, or you could load a primer upside down, and then you have a screw up there. If you do get a primer that gets stuck and doesn't want to go in all the way and resist going forward, there's two things that could happen. Two things that could be happening. Of course, you got the blockage where the wall of the previous primer is there, or you just have a really tight fit on the primers. There might be some shit in there that where it doesn't want to go in. This is very common for NATO ammo. Not so much with nickel-plated brass. This is the easiest stuff to reload. It's money. So, anyways, if you're going to have to pull out this partially primed brass, what you can do in order to save that primer, instead of having to kick it out, what you can actually do is, of course, take out your charged brass over on this side and put this back in and gently deprime it and try to catch it. This is probably the weak point of this reloader, is right here, where the empty primer ends up flowing. So I may actually get an example of that here. But it's really hard to tell if your brass is going to have a wall that's going to stay there. I mean, you could always go down slowly and try to see the primer before it kind of exits, and you can kind of see from the general size of what falls if you got a full primer that came out, or if it was partial, and then before you try to prime it, you can check it to make sure. But you can see I have a paper clip there, because the little piece that you have, a little cotter pinner, I guess you could call it, or whatever, it doesn't actually last very long. And I have plenty of paper clips, so I'm able to remedy it, and so far I haven't had too much of an issue with it. But this is the general risks and my experience of reloading. But as far as I kept on getting distracted by the economics, and I talked about primers. I can get the Cellular and Bellet primers for about 24 bucks for 1,000. So that's like 2.4 cents per shot on that. And of course my brass is, free, because, I got it on the range, or on my range, or a public range, or whatever. And so it's no biggie. The bullets, I use Everglades ammo. Everglades ammo right now is having a sale on the concave base 115 grain, and it's about $260 for 4,000. So that's the best deal I've ever seen. Usually 9mm is falling in the range of about the same as 40 caliber on Everglades ammo, and it's about $300 for 1,000 for 9mm. And You know, that's the best deal I've seen. And some websites won't let you get it 4,000, but Everglades Ammo does. And they have the least expensive bullets, and they're just fine. They sell a variety of stuff, and even, you know, match grade competition level stuff, so I always recommend them. Now, as far as powder is concerned, I like to use Bullseye powder, and this is, I'm at the mercy, just like with primers, of using my local stores, so I have to use my military discount to try to get the best price, but for Bullseye, I have an 8-pound keg that I am almost done with, and it cost me about $170. So do the math on that. So it's about 40, or not 40, but it's about $20, a little bit more for 8. So 21.25, I guess you could say, or something like that, for, you know, 8 pounds of powder, and that stuff has lasted me a long time. And again, failure to pick up a primer. So anyways, there are risks to reloading, but typically I'm falling in under 10 cents per shot, and even if you get like $180 for 1,000 or something like that, you're still paying more than you really need to. But here's the thing, if you're going to start out and you don't want to use once fired brass, or you want to start out with new brass, you're going to end up coming in about the same price as just ordering ammo online or going and getting it from a store that is on sale. And that's really the downfall of reloading, is if you have to add in the price of brass, it is going to cost you more. So what I like to do, since I'm not too stingy about everything and good enough is enough for me, I typically will just get new ammo, and I'll fire it off, and I always have to get, you know, brass case or whatever, obviously, because I want to reload it. So I don't even really try to test guns with steel anymore. My old reloads are a good enough test. So anyways, of course, I'm starting to have problems with the primers. I don't know if I'm short shucking it or what, but that's just a risk that you take. And of course, it's getting a little sticky here. You want to stop it before the lever goes all the way. If it's sticking like right here and the lever can keep going, you want to stop at the point it sticks. That's why you want to monitor this. This is why I like having a little bit more interaction with the machine, because this is a problem that you can encounter. So anyways, really? Okay, so there we go. But anyways, you know, economically, it works for me because I'm paying half. Here in Alaska, you're going to be looking at $200 or over for 1,000 rounds of the cheapest stuff. The price just dropped on steel case, so it was like $9.50 for 1,000, or $9.50 per box, and it's like $9.99 for that brown box Remington law enforcement and military crap. And I currently have some of that, but you know, $9.99. Then I get my military discount, so it ends up being a good amount, I guess. So it's 5%, you know, not really that big of a deal, but it's something. So it comes in about the price of, if I go to Anchorage where there's no sales tax, which isn't the case here in Wasilla, then I'm paying about the same as the steel case. But of course, military discount on the steel case ends up being about $9 a box. So, you know, pick your poison if you don't want to reload, but you're willing to pay that little extra for the convenience. But, you know, the time that it takes for me to reload is about a third of the time, if not less. Oh, and I got some media in here. I don't think you're going to be able to actually see that too well, but I got some media in there, and of course, nope, that didn't work out too well. So I don't think it's going to go from heating it. A little bit came out, but I still got some on the bottom. But anyways, it's not really that convenient just to have preloaded ammunition. Of course, if you do have a problem, you can call the manufacturer if they fuck up the manufacturing of it, like it skirts down the bottom or scrapes or whatever. You can call them, and they'll typically send you a box. Not so much here in Alaska, but you know, that's just a thing. But of course, when we're talking about convenience and stuff like that, as you saw, I had that media in there that didn't want to come out too easy, so that can slow down the time. I don't have anything in here, but you know, just emphasizing that's what you have to do. It's taking the time to do that. or whatever. It can be a pain in the ass sometimes. But on average, it only takes me like 10 minutes at worst to actually reload stuff when I'm not sitting here bullshitting with you guys, and it's pretty much flawless most of the time. After I do my reloading session, what I try to do is I wipe down my machine and make sure to get all this damn residue off. And every now and then, after a few thousand or whatever rounds, or when I get bored, is I will go ahead and I will take off everything. I will disassemble it a little bit, take off this, the conversion kits and everything, and I will take off the priming tube right here, and I'll take off as much as I can, and then I will wipe the whole thing down, lubricate the surface, let it sit with the brake free, because it will condition the surfaces to kind of prevent extra fouling in the future, or stuff from sticking. And again, I got more crap, and I can tell just by the looks of it that it's really crammed in there. So again, it's stuck. An Allen key works pretty good, so you just rotate it on there and try to get it out. This was one of the ones where a spider ended up coming in and spinning a damn web in the brass, so it kind of screwed it up. But scrape it a bit, and of course you got to make sure the bullet sits properly, because I'm kind of past that point where the cartridge doesn't, or the brass doesn't really get belled very well when it charges, and so I got to hold the bullet on there. I'm not really too concerned about the belling, because the biggest thing about the belling is it just makes it easier for the bullet to sit in there. But of course everything changes as you're constantly reloading, so that's just a thing. But we're coming to the end here, and I don't really have too much to talk about. It's just these little methods here and there for, you know, saving brass, saving bullets, preventing, you know, having to waste things. Like with the primer, just gently kick them out if it kind of screws up or whatever. And instead of trying to pull it out, you can try to push it back out if you have a screw up. But yeah, it can get, you know, messed up at times, but I've had pretty good luck with having reliable ammo for the most part. Every now and then you get failures. In Remington ammo, holy hell. One of the other reasons, other than it's overly expensive and it isn't really conducive to going into NATO ammo or just tight primer holes, is you get a lot of freaking failures. So I did at least, and I kept on trying. I thought, it's just a fluke, you know, bad batch or whatever. Well, here's the problem. When I get several bad batches from thousands and thousands of different lotted Remington primers, I'm fucking done. I'm not playing that game. I don't want all those damn ruined primers. And here we go. We got the last couple of primers, and you know, I watched this. But anyways, after it actually goes flush and it comfortably sits in here with no real room, then you're done, and you don't need to put brass in here. I know it can be a pattern, but for some of you, you might. Yep, no primer, so we're good. And so for some of you, you might actually get in the habit of constantly loading brass in here, or what might happen is when you get a little closer, I would say only put more primers in if it gets about the height of this little check right here, or the little indicator, because you can overload it, and then it'll be a pain in the ass preventing them from falling out when you have them in this blue tube, because you can see the hole. Again, my camera likes to screw up on me, but you can see in this hole, you could put the clip back in here, but you're going to have primers all the way down. So that's, you know, something to consider. And I know this video has been long and everything, but I appreciate you guys coming along, and I hope this was informative. There is a lot to say in this, and I wanted to be as detailed as I could, and the best way is to take you along with my priming. Now, this took me like 20 minutes, which is like the slowest it's ever taken me to load 100 rounds, but, you know, I got concentrating on talking and stuff like that. But anyways, thanks a lot for watching, and go ahead and leave a comment below.